Last Pint Productions presents the New Way podcast. The New Way contains adult content and is recorded in advance. The following episode was originally recorded on October 6th, 2021. Listener discretion is advised.
So you were in Vietnam, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah?
Were you in the shit?
Yeah, I was in the shit.
Last night, Darth Vader came down from planet Vulcan and told me that if I didn't take Lorraine out, that he'd melt my brain.
Here's how you get him. He pulls a knife, you pull a gun. He sends one of yours to the hospital, you send one of his to the morgue.
We came, we saw, we kicked its ass.
Everybody wants to be naked and famous. Everybody wants to be just like me, I'm naked.
Will you help teach me about this? What is it? A new way?
Hello and welcome once again to the New Way podcast, where we break down pop culture so you don't have to. I'm your host, Matt Schenk, joined in studio by Mr. Benjamin Scott Wilson.
Yeah, we're in the same room.
In the same room again, and joined across the Zooms by Mr. Steely Dan himself, Nicholas Santa Croce.
Sorry, I'm a little distracted. My sister just texted me and said that the ending to Midnight Mass was disappointing.
Well,
she's disappointing.
Well,
she's lame.
Well, it's funny because number one on my list of things to discuss before we get into our topic is I'm all thrown off, Matt. Now I'm all upset. I don't know. I will say we're going to discuss a show that Dr. Rick nicknamed Midnight Mess.
Hi, Dr. Rick.
And got very upset of watching all of the episodes. Now, Ben, have you finished it, or are you still?
Yes, I have seen it all.
Okay. So yeah, well, we'll get into a little bit of spoiler territory, but I'm curious. I know, Nick, it was very much in your wheelhouse, and to a large extent mine as well. I like kind of the science versus faith discussions, but I might be a little bit.
Ben had a name for it. It cracked me up in a text thread. It was like, Nick's always a sucker for Catholic doom horror, or what was he like? You made up a whole genre that was dead on.
Yeah, I forgot exactly what I said.
I'll find it for later.
But is essentially that all I was saying was essentially I was regurgitating something that you said at some point, which is like if it has to do with the Bible and it has to do with like dread, then
dread humor.
You're kind of like in.
Well, yeah, and that's
you called it biblical dread horror.
Yes, that's what it was.
Which is great.
That's a pretty apt discussion. Yeah, I
really liked it.
The show was really interesting to me because I will say I was 100% on board for almost the whole show, and it wasn't necessarily the resolution, but I was talking to Ben a little bit about this. I felt the same problem with this that I felt with Bly Manor, and it doesn't exist for me in Hill House, which is that I think he gets a little confused in what his message or kind of like angle is in some of these, where I think the story gets away from it a little bit. And like the one that kind of annoyed me a little bit in this, and spoiler alerts if you've not watched Midnight Mass and are going to, but the doctor character,
not if they listen to you and my sister.
That's no, I actually recommend. I totally recommend to watch it because I think there's some amazing things in it, including the guy that was in Hill House that plays the drunk. I think delivers one of the fucking best TV performances of the year.
The guy who plays Joe Colley in this.
Yeah.
I forgot the name of the actor, but he's been in quite a bit of stuff. He's been in a lot of stuff. I'm thinking you may not realize it.
Yeah.
Just because he looks very similar in Hill House and this, but he's looked different in other roles just because he's very unkempt.
I mean, I'll say
to be truthful, like I don't remember Bly. I know I watched some of it, but I don't really remember it. And this is truly, for all intents and purposes, my first introduction to Mike Flanagan.
Sure.
And what I saw was, characters that are so irredeemable, there's nothing they could do for you not to hate them. And on the other side of the spectrum, you got Joe Colley, you got Preacher Paul, who are very flawed, bad people even. But it has you have a genuine respect for them, that they do have redeeming qualities in a way that I think is smarter and more tactful than I'm used to.
Yeah, and
that's just me.
And those parts I like. And I mean, the Colley character for me, when his big scene with the girl that confronts him. And it should be her, by all intents and purposes, it should be her scene. And I could not stop watching his performance and his reaction and just like that full rock bottom moment for him in that. But I think where I got a little bit where I say I don't know exactly what kind of the message is or what his angle is, and obviously he talks a lot about that big long, I mean, one of 142 monologues in it, but the what happens after you die debate and that kind of thing. But where I felt like they could have lost everything was the whole science versus religion thing and the doctor, spoiler, doctor daughter. That like it reminded me of that SNL sketch about X-Files where like Scully's looking at an alien walking into the room and she's like, I just don't think aliens exist. And I'm like, what?
That's not how I interpreted it.
No. So here's the thing.
That's not how I took it at all.
First off, I didn't interpret it that way either. I interpreted that as being a character choice for the character of basically she is like analytical to the point of not addressing kind of the elephant in the room. I would say, and it was my main criticism after the fact, is like at some point somebody on this fucking island has got to say, oh, these are vampires, and nobody fucking says it. And it doesn't happen to the point. Like, it was clear that Flanagan was like, I don't want to say it.
Yeah.
I don't want to say it, and by not saying it almost brings just an undue amount of like pressure to be like, does the popular media and like the world at large not exist around this island, or is this a vacuum? Like, what the fuck is going on here?
And this is how I took it. To me, there's no confusion for me as a recovering Catholic. It's like the butterfly anime meme from the Brave Fighter of Sun. Firebird, where he's like, is this an angel? And it's obviously a vampire. It's like Nosferatu, like the classic depiction of Nosferatu, and like, it must be an angel. And it's not because they're stupid or even that they've never seen a vampire movie or know what that even is, right? It's that specifically growing up Catholic, there are parts of the Bible that I remember vividly asking my mom, when I was learning about transubstantiation.
Oh yeah,
which is what Catholics believe, that the Eucharist, the communion, the body of Christ, the bread is actually literally physically turns into the body of Jesus, and the wine literally physically turns into the blood. And that differs from different sects of Christianity. I think maybe more reasonable sects of Christianity who take that ceremony as a symbol, right? Yeah. But it just goes to show, like, certain things in the Bible, and especially a lot of Catholic spins on Christianity. There are parts that you could take literally, the way that it's written. And when this vampire flies in, and the people are obviously shocked and scared at the sight of this terrible, obvious vampire, they're terrified. And Bev and the preacher are like, no, don't worry. The Bible said that you would be awestruck and scared at the sight of an angel. And so to me, the genius is, yes, clearly it's a vampire. They never say it because they're so blinded by their literal and bastardization of these passages that they've grown up on, that they just will do mental somersaults to convince themselves that it's an angel and not a vampire, when all the evidence suggests it's a vampire and it's right in front of their faces.
I agree, but what about all the people that are understanding in that moment it's all bullshit? You see what I'm saying? Like, they understand that there's stuff going wrong.
I think that's, and again, it's not, I think, to be taken as literally as the people in this town take the Bible. It's more like it's about religion and how it sinks its claws in the towns. Even the non-believers, you see the sheriff who is walking on eggshells. He goes, I after 9/11, I was treated like a terrorist when I joined the police force. I'm just trying not to rock the boat. So the first thing that would get me on people's bad list is like, or criticizing this religion. That's the majority of the island. It's all a statement, and on top of the literal vampires, Flanagan also has this layer of, okay, Not only are we have literal vampires, Bev is a metaphorical vampire, and religion itself is a metaphorical vampire, sucking these tiny towns dry and taking the money from this oil settlement, donating it to this rec center and into the church, and sucking them dry. So you have two vampires in this show, and to me, it's all about playing with metaphors.
Energy vampire. No, so to me, and I appreciate, because I think all of that is definitely consistent with all the values of the show. But to me, as far as a message, and this could be what you're saying, because to me the science thing doesn't really bother me. I just thought that okay, she's analytical. I just get I think it's. I understand why, because if somebody says, wait, isn't this just like a vampire thing? And then everybody, that would take you out of the show. So I understand, I guess, why they didn't do it. But
in 2021, though, when we've seen the religious right look the other way in the face of obvious evil, you know what I mean? Like it's sort of a statement on the fact that
there's
as a society, we're in a place where if you are so fanatical and unflinching in a literal interpretation of the Bible, that puts you at a survival disadvantage. I love the idea, like, hey, what if vampires really did exist, but the first person to find one was a super, conservative Catholic priest on his way out, walking the deserts with dementia. It's the perfect in, because you already have a base of people who believe fantastical things on the level of vampires. Jonah getting swallowed by the whale, Daniel in the lion's den, David and Goliath, Noah in the ark. Making a person out of a rib. Listen, there are plenty of things in the Bible that are right on par with vampire myths, and yet it's not crazy to believe in that. It's crazy to believe in vampires, though.
To me, the entire show is a thesis on power. That's what it is to me, more than anything else. To me, it's about how power of all kinds isn't necessarily a bad thing. And I love it. So it's something that's constantly revisited.
With great power
comes great responsibility. Yeah, of course.
You know it.
And that's the idea of the entire thing to me, because
Flanagan, Uncle Bendit.
They even okay. So for example, you have I call him Saracen because he was in Friday Night Lights. The main character who unfortunately I think I thought he was good in the show, but he
he was a little flat.
Yeah, it was a little flat.
Well, what he went through, he's a shell of a human being.
Yeah, exactly.
That's also important to remember.
Yeah, of course, naturally. But I love the whole component of Father Paul basically being like Jesus turned water into wine, so wine's not a bad thing. Like alcohol is not a bad thing. It's like what is it when you are inundated with the power of it or with an excess of it? And basically that's a theme that's revisited all throughout the show, which is religion isn't bad. I think that ultimately the idea of the end of the show is religion isn't bad, but when you use it for the wrong means and you don't utilize that power and influence correctly, then you find yourselves at the most evil and most susceptible part of society. And that's the thesis of the show to me. I don't think it's about science versus religion, because honestly, science doesn't play a fucking part in it. I think that you have one character in it that's a scientist.
Well,
that's more lost than anything else.
I mean, if you're telling me that the two monologues about what happens after you die are not,
it's about moderation,
are not about spirituality versus science. It's that entire end of episode 4 is science versus belief.
I disagree, actually. I think what was happening there is you realize you were having two completely coexisting things that were so similar. Their experiences were literally so similar that there was hardly a dichotomy between them at all. That was my takeaway.
I do also get the impression, at least for me, watching that science and religion and whatever you want to call it, fantastical myth, all live in the same universe, right? Because we're watching a vampire with our own eyes. That's real. That really happened in the context of the show, right? And what also really happened is the town doctor analyzing this blood. So to me, that was the literal moment where science meets religion, fantasy, and they coexisted.
Yeah, I mean, I like I said, I think there is undeniably a discussion being made in that show for the fact that the priest's illegitimate daughter is the town doctor and lesbian. I mean, it's like they like piled every single trait that's anti-Catholic into one character, like to bear the burden of all of that. But
that was his great sin, before he started eating people.
Yeah, so I used to just philander a little bit. I love how she also like Bev just brushes it off, like I heard the rumors. Yeah, you fucked around, big deal. At least you weren't Dylan kids,
Well, we just got news about the French Catholics today and how many children were molested and how those people bent over backwards to protect priests. So that also to me I think was, and didn't it feel very sexual when that vampire would jump on someone, pin them on their back,
well, it always
suck on their.
That's how vampires are always inherently. There's a giving over of power. So I think that's where you're right
for sure. But
and in the first episode, he was doing a whole lot of pussy.
Well, all I'm saying is like you see this vampire and he's like naked on top of them. And so it's always sexual for sure, and that's a trope. But like to me, it was amped up. It was turned to 11, and I think that's also her immediate thought when she comes in. And again, you wouldn't be listening if you're afraid of spoilers, but you see Joe Collie dead on the floor and Father Paul just sitting emotionless in the corner.
And she goes, "Okay."
It's coldly, yeah. Okay. How do we?
Okay.
That is the Catholic Church covering up all these atrocities.
Yeah. Well, Bev Keane is a very, very, very well realized villain, regardless of what you think
the
of the
most
show.
Stephen King of the character. But I think Ben.
I would say also J.K. Rowling. I hate to use her name, but it was very Harry Potter. What's her name?
Oh, Umbridge.
Umbridge.
A little bit,
Umbridge.
Yeah. Well, and I think Ben, it's interesting that that you're looking at it from a power angle, because I think that's there for me. The entire show was about addiction, the same way that Hill House is about trauma and abuse and coming over that. But this show is in its addiction to religion, to alcohol, to power, and I think that was the most interesting point that they didn't. Yeah. There wasn't enough time to do, because the whole town turns it happened so quick with that kind of resolution. Is the parents being like, yeah, I want blood, but I'm not going to do it because that's not who I am. Like everyone else, just like you were made to believe that the compulsion is so great that there is no way to overcome it. That you just have to do it. But then you got fucking Elliot out there, just like, no, I'm not gonna kill people and drink their blood. Look at these fucking assholes around here. And the wife yeah, let's just go hang out at the beach. I thought it was such an interesting thing that I would have liked to have spent more time with. Like there have to be other people out there that are like, no, I'm not gonna go drink blood. I'm not gonna do that. This is fucked up. Like I don't want any part of this.
And that was even
these are vampires. Don't say the A word.
The only time you see anybody kind of really pushing back is when the mother starts to get better, and all she wants to do is be able to be well enough to go back to church, right? And she finally goes, and her first thought was like, "That's not my church. That's not my preacher." That was a disgrace. That's the only time you see anybody really push back before the vampires even start, infiltrating the town.
Yeah, unless you're Muslim.
That also represents the small faction of people who were religious and based their identities around it. But when they saw something that was wrong, they backed off. And the thing is, it's just not the majority of people when you've been raised with it. And I got a ton of Catholic PTSD in the best way watching this. And they're very specific. And they talk about, the metaphors of like, here, the vampires are eating people's flesh, and this sacrament, it was a big deal. When Sorensen didn't even go up to take communion because he had sinned and wasn't worthy of the Eucharist sacrament, right? All these things that I remember growing up with, raised as fact. And then growing up a little older and like asking questions of my mother, like, so do we believe that the communion is actually Jesus's body? And she's like, yes. I go, why does it taste like bread? And you're like, well, that's part of the magic. They pray over it and it turns into Jesus.
It's because Jesus was white.
And I remember thinking at the time, like, that was a really powerful, that moment in Mass is really, it's the finale. It's the finale of Mass. You lead up to Eucharist. It's very special. and it's powerful in its own right as a symbolic thing. But the moment as a kid when, I'm like, why does it taste like wine? And why am I allowed to drink wine? And what is happening? There are certain things that, especially in Catholicism, it's different from other sects, that take things a little further. And I think that this show is really, for me, a really smart and sometimes compassionate but damning view, specifically not on religion, but specifically Catholicism.
Flanagan is a former Catholic, now agnostic.
We all are.
So yeah, that's just so you kind of get that to color your perspective.
Well, that's my perspective, pretty much.
He also only refers to the creature as an angel, which is kind of funny and interesting to me. But yeah,
I loved
it. It's worth a watch. It's definitely worth a watch.
I realize that I'm the exact person that he made this for, but I still think it was a masterpiece. And as much as I enjoyed Squid Game, every 5 years there's a battle royale ripoff, and they're all pretty good.
Don't please say anything. I don't even know what Squid Game's about. I'm trying to go in as cold as possible, so I just.
Oh my god, are you serious?
I saw the first episode.
I don't want to know. I'm gonna watch the first on the plane tomorrow.
Well, then I won't spoil anything. But the fact that is becoming the number one show in the world, it's really taken the wind out of the sails of Midnight Mass. And what I tell people is this: watch the first 3 episodes. If you're interested, if this has piqued your at least curiosity. Watch the first 3 episodes, and if you're not in after 3, you can jump ship. Do you guys agree with that?
Sure.
If you're not in after 3 episodes, you're not going to be in. And I think Hamish should get an Emmy for his performance in that series.
Yeah, everyone. I think it's great. There's some great writing. There's some great performances. There's some interesting ideas. We maybe differ on the end a little bit, but I would definitely recommend it as far as something to watch. Speaking of things to watch, also, and I will not do any spoilers because I'm pretty sure neither of you have watched it yet, and probably nobody listening yet. But the finale of Marvel's What If aired.
I got 15 minutes in before we started recording.
Aired on Disney Plus, and I will once again say what Marvel is doing with their TV faction and showing on Disney Plus is better than we deserve, and it is so well integrated with what is going to be happening. Like there's a ton of shit that happens in this finale that has ramifications for all kinds of things in the MCU as we know it, and including I cannot wait to talk to you guys about this. So when you have watched this in a couple of episodes, we'll talk to it. But there's something that ties into something that's happening in the real world with Disney and Marvel that I'm super curious about the timing of. But we'll get to that another time.
Interesting.
I'm so far behind on What If. I only saw the first 2 episodes, but
they get progressively better, I would say, and just very emotional. And I will also say
animation is fantastic.
And they do I know everyone kind of was not a fan of the first episode in it, and I will say the finale gives reason for that first episode to exist and a pretty good purpose.
Nice.
So
I remember when it first rolled out, people were kind of less than enthusiastic with the Captain Carter episode. I was in from the beginning, but I think the interest has ramped up, and I forgot which one of my friends to give credit to. It was either Dave or Adam. And the more I think about it, the more I think I might agree. Listen, I love the Marvel live action movies. Very few things I would change about them. But at the same time, as good as they are, I think in capable hands, you're looking at like Spider-Verse as the gold standard. And now What If? I think an animated show is the best of the superhero vehicle. You got Batman the Animated Series. Live action is amazing, and it's the movies have been incredible. But there's something about really competent, well done, creative animation that really feels like comics are coming to life in a different way. And for the people that actually grew up reading comics, and it's a totally different flavor. And I just really hope that this cements another, because Marvel, DC is actually, for the only way they've really beaten Marvel in the past decade has been in their animation. And now with Spider-Verse and What If, of course, now Marvel's starting to take the lead again. But I think there's always a place for animated superhero stories, and I hope that continues because it's special.
Totally.
You know?
It's greenlit for a season 2. So What If is going to be multi-seasonal. So
What if we get a feature length film that's all animated in the Marvel property? How fun would that be?
we shall see. I mean, it's going to be
Sony
very
did it.
interesting. Yeah, lots to discuss after
What if
that.
you animate Howard the Duck? Make a 2-hour Howard the Duck animated film.
I think that's the only way you can do a Howard the Duck film anymore. To be
Well,
honest,
they
even
literally
after Gunn stuff.
made a live action Howard the Duck, and it was the first Marvel movie ever.
Well, and it's also kind of crazy to think about the fact that we are getting in December our Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas special from James
Some fun
Gunn.
teases this
and
week on that.
I'm super excited for whatever craziness that, I mean, James Gunn doing a Christmas special just makes me giddy. But
And you know that he a child of that horrible Star Wars Christmas special, which is famous for being the first time we ever see Boba Fett, right? Well, he just tweeted this week. He's been having a great week on Twitter, which is a great return for James Gunn as far as Twitter goes. But at first he tweets during the Facebook Instagram outage, just posted all the Guardians Easter eggs on Facebook. It'll only be up for 10 minutes, check it out or whatever. But then the other thing that he teased was, maybe I'm a homer, maybe this is too, maybe this is like Midnight Mass and Nick Santa Croce, but I am introducing what I think is like the best, my favorite Marvel character in this special. So people have started speculating what's that going to be, and is it a joke? Is it one of the worst characters, like Polka Dot Man and Suicide Squad, or
that James Gunn decides it strikes his fancy? So I'm
or
excited.
maybe we see Adam Warlock first in Christmas, and then in the live action, just like Boba Fett.
That is also possible, and it wouldn't be
a nice little
unlike
tip of the
them
hat, isn't it?
To secret cast all of those things. So we'll see. They're probably like, just leak a bunch of Spider-Man stuff. They won't care who we cast as Adam Warlock. It'll be fine.
It's true.
What if a poorly CGI'd Luke Skywalker at the very ending just walks into the Milano? I guess it's not the Milano anymore. What is it now?
Oh, the Zephyr, not Zephyr.
The Carrie Wurer. What is it called? The Pamela Anderson.
I forget. Yeah. But anyway, I want to get us into our topic. So this is going to be kind of one of our different episodes where we're not really necessarily talking about a genre or anything. But I happen to enjoy these episodes. I know I've heard back from some of our listeners that they do like these as well. Some of you may find this incredibly boring, or you tuned out because you haven't watched Midnight Mass yet. But there is.
Oh, and fuck you if that's you out there. You heard me. Send all hate mail to mattshank@gmail.com.
That's right. Sure, that won't go to me, but that's good. That's perfect. So there's a bit of a tumultuous situation happening in Hollywood right now, and if you haven't heard about it, I'm going to kind of walk through some of the players in this and what's going on and what it means, and also I think getting eventually to the idea of that this is not just something specific to the film industry. It's a very public version of this, but it's something that's very much been a result of COVID and people being at home or out of work or having time to think about things. And it's kind of interesting. So the general idea is that there is a union called the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, the IATSE. So the IATSE, they represent over 150,000.
I think it's supposed to be boycott IATSE.
Yes, that's good. Oh man! If you haven't seen Koyon Naskatsi, I recommend it. It's a film school documentary. It's a really good joke.
I believe it came out in 1988.
I'm sure.
Correct. Keep going, Matt.
I'm sure everyone out there got that joke. So, they're a union that represents over 150,000 crew members in what they call below the line positions. So editors, art directors, electricians, hairstylists, props. There are all of these different facets, and it's something to really think about. The staggering when you're sitting in your movie theater after a Marvel movie and waiting for your post-credit sequence for 10 minutes, and you're watching the cavalcade of names. That's what these are the people that we're talking about on this. and it
And
covers,
think about just the phrase "below the line,"
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
how dehumanizing that just
Yes.
is, just innately.
I mean, I think technically, if you're just talking about the technical side of film, there are only 11 members of the crew.
Yeah.
They're actually above the line.
yeah.
Oh yeah, the editor, the person who makes the fucking movie below the line.
Yeah,
okay.
below the line.
All right. All right.
So they and they cover film and TV production, but also it's not being talked about as much. But they also include workers in live theater, concerts, trade shows, a bunch of other areas as well. So it's a very large part of the entertainment industry. So who are they battling right now? All right now they're coming up against the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, the AMPTP. Right. So why
It's a brand of gas station convenience stores. in SoCal.
exactly. And so the idea is they are threatening to strike, and the reason they're threatening to strike is fairly straightforward. They have a ridiculous amount of hours that they are made to work in terrible overtime, sometimes paid, sometimes not. This idea of what they call rolling lunches, where they're just expected to work through lunchtime. And the biggest thing that is, and I'd say
But Matt, I think that you're oversimplifying it. Even if you have to work through lunch and wrote to a 17-hour day, a lot of times they'll get a coffee truck that you can, quickly go grab a coffee if there isn't a line or you don't have to pee.
Yeah.
So stop complaining, Matt.
Well,
do your job.
And I think the biggest part of this, and I think what sets this apart from where we're gonna, I think when I talk about where this goes bigger in other industries, the part that is less like other industries is the turnaround time, and that's a huge part of this strike. And part of this is I have been reading a ton on this Facebook group that is basically crew stories. And everyone just talking about all of these things, and so
I gotta say, Matt, you're framing this like you've been in the machine. Like the way you're setting this up, I'm just throwing it out there. This is very much what's happening right now.
And this also is very, when I worked in an ad agency, I understand every single one of these things. I understand being told there's deadlines. I understand that you do overtime without getting paid for overtime, and it's expected of you and required of you. And if you don't want to do it, go fuck yourself.
There's a reason why you only work at Zimmerman for 2 years.
Yeah, and I worked for the shitty company that hated Zimmerman and did worse shit to their employees for less money. So thanks a lot, Chumney. Anyway, so there
are a lot of bad Zimmermans in Florida, dude.
Yeah, that's very true. That they're not the worst of them. But so then the idea then is, okay, well, what do they want? And I think this boils down to one of these words is very important, and I think case is going to get turned around to be much more about one thing. But yes, better wages is part of it. Bigger cut of streaming profits is part of what they're looking for contractually. Longer rest periods, which is a huge part of it. But the main thing that seems to be at the forefront of everyone's fucking wish list on this is a complete intangible that costs nothing. Well, it does if you do it right, and it's respect. And I think that is the most fascinating part of all of this. And I did in my research on this, it was kind of interesting because in reading the crew story stuff, they're like, don't read Deadline, don't read Variety. These are all basically pieces being done by the producers. Don't get your information there. So I didn't
by the liberal media.
It took me a lot of articles before I got to someone calling this out and be like, no, it's literally in writing in parts is respect for employees. And so when we talk about how this is going to impact things, it's kind of crazy because they have not had a lot of shakeups in terms of strikes like that. The last strike from this union was 1945, and the most recent thing we had was, the 2007 writers' strike. And they've had in that time that the closest they've gotten to something approaching this was in 97. A guy named Brent Hersman fell asleep at the wheel after driving home from a 19-hour workday on the set of Pleasantville and was killed. And there was a huge settlement, but nothing ever came from it in terms of changing the industry. So this is where we are, what's been leading up to this. And the question really is, and this is kind of something for us to discuss in the room here, because I'm curious. You guys work in an industry that has issues like this. I've worked in one major, offender of this in an ad agency. I know people that work in TV media. Nick, you're completely involved were involved in the industry, and most of your friends now are still currently involved in the industry. So, and this is not, like I said, limited to this. This happens on Wall Street. This happens in the medical profession. This happens in the legal profession. And I saw that as well when I worked as a paralegal. So so you kind of ask yourself, what is different now than it has been? This stuff has been happening for forever. And the difference really is, from what I can tell, and I'm talking to you, Nick, about this, and Ben, is COVID. COVID caused a lot of people to reassess their priorities.
They had a moment to breathe for once in their decades-long career in some cases.
And not just breathe, but breathe and see how little the people that were supposed to be taking care of them gave a shit during that time. And what's really fascinating,
I don't think they shut down Midnight Rider when Sarah Jones died, cinematographer. That made big news, but it's not like, it was kind of business as usual. Let's, mourn and, pack things up, finish this up. I don't know the details about that, to be fair, but it's this.
Wasn't
when
Sarah
you talk
Jones,
about respect,
Sarah Jones was in the cinematography. She was an AC. She was right?
Right.
Yeah, she was first.
She was in the Cinematographers Guild, I believe, though.
Yeah.
And it was a freak accident, and not super unlike the land of this thing, and could have been a complete accident, but it doesn't matter. It's the fact that we feel symbolically expendable every day on the job. So when someone really is expendable, someone died and they got a new AC, they finished the movie. Yeah. It's sort of like, it puts it in a stark focus. But when you're working those types of hours, and it was not unusual for me to work, it would be 12 or 13 hour days, not unusual to go into 15 or 16. For me, it was an hour ride home too, each way. So there were days, weeks where I had literally 6 hours to eat and sleep and be ready to go the next day. And any normal person would say that's insane. That's not healthy. But when you're young and fresh out of college and you got this expendability just ingrained in your head that like, oh, you think minimum wage 15-hour days isn't a good deal? Okay, well, no problem. All we have to do is post one thing on the internet and we'll have, no exaggeration, we'll have 50 applicants, in the first hour. You come to this industry fearful that your first mistake will be your last, that you can be replaced super easily, and you can. And it just creates this sort of this willingness to just go along with whatever the producers want, push through in the golden hour or go for a 17-hour day, just get the shot, get the shot. A lot of times, I remember in film school, we talked to people, they had a camera fall off a grip truck, and it's like this running joke at Florida State because the audio was still there from the moment that it fell off and crashed and exploded into a million pieces. But it was never come out and said, but I don't know, Ben, you tell me. I kind of sometimes feel that the impression is if you have a camera in your hand and you're falling or something, you take the fall. You'll have the camera fall on you. Because
if you're referring to Jeremy's story, it happened a little different. Than it wasn't a camera falling off. It was a camera that was rigged to a car. It was
That's what I said.
It was a car rig that ran into a telephone pole.
Right, but I use that as an example, Ben, because the equipment was damaged and destroyed. Okay,
right,
and that was a big fucking deal.
Yeah.
As a college student, I remember thinking oh shit, did his family have to pay for that? Did he have to pay for that camera? What do you do?
He worked at the film school for 2 years.
Well, see, it's ingrained. If you go to film school and early on in the industry, if you have your choice between saving a camera and breaking your arm, if you want to have a long career, break your arm, that will heal. Right. And at least you can say that
I'm with
the camera didn't get damaged, and talk about respect. It's not, it's so, and you're right, Matt. It is when you boil it down, but it's an oversimplification because it actually is quite sinister. The version of respect that people don't get.
To just piggyback off of what you're saying, I think all it comes is to allocation of a perceived value versus time. And so that's what you're saying basically is like, oh, this is a $220,000 RA 35 millimeter camera, or it's somebody who can be replaced in 5 seconds.
And film school is one thing, but like if you're shooting a movie for a multi-million-dollar studio,
yeah,
you know, that the cost of that camera isn't the same as, you know, 2 months of a broken arm that could affect someone's family or livelihood or pain. But like the thing is, we should live in a society where just not death. Take death off the table. Just a broken arm or a sprain. Honestly, even however minor the injury is, the focus should be, is the person okay? You know,
right?
Is the person behind the camera okay? Not is the camera okay? Well, and that's the respect.
I was about to kind of extrapolate sort of what that was just a singular point based off of what you brought up. I think where it really translates, at least in the industry, to me, based off of my limited experience, but also knowing a lot of friends, is, for example, so you're, you know, going in as a producer basically, and you're saying, okay, well, what's the most effective way, cost effective way for us to shoot this film? You may have, for example, a location that is expensive, that is time prohibitive to film at. However, it's critical to the story. So what are you going to do? Well, you're going to fit as much filming in there in a short period of time as you possibly can. And that means a lot of these kind of overtime hours, basically working through single things at a certain location, out of order, out of sequence, in sometimes potentially dangerous situations. And that is a perfectly fine consideration, because when it comes to the balance sheet, it shows that this is going to, as opposed to us, doing it in sequence, coming back to that location. Well, how much is that going to cost? I mean, this is what happens when, you know, a producer basically kind of comes down to brass tacks. Now, I understand that's a necessary job. You have to look at what's the most efficient way to make a film, because that's part of the job. But that has historically in the industry come at the expense of everyone who works on that film. Everyone. And there has been such little consideration for specifically below the line people, that it's basically like we've created all the industry does then is set you up in the most potentially dangerous, potentially hazardous situation, and has set you up to fail.
Yeah.
Or for there to be an issue, with no consideration. The only consideration when it comes down to it is money. It comes down to money. Yeah. And that's the evil part of it.
and that's like Matt said, you know, and we're going to see obviously huge ripples in this industry, but you know, we're not the only industry where money is just king.
Sure.
And this is the biggest strike on this scale. This the fact that they voted for this strike is a huge win for labor. Like, it's really haven't seen anything like this, like Matt said. I mean, in decades and decades and decades. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
And I do recommend it, like for really, you can't sit on the podcast and just read these stories, you know, for an hour, but I really recommend if you're curious about specific individual stories that kind of paint the picture of why this became an issue, the light bulb that went off after COVID, like Matt mentioned. Go to IA_stories on Instagram. It blew up. It had celebrities reposting them. Sometimes it was performative, sometimes it was genuine. It's funny, Katherine Heigl, of course, made the news again because she used to get lame-basted for criticizing it, and now she's like, fuckers, here are my receipts. But and I really recommend checking out those stories. And I have stories like that of my own.
Sure. And
that I look back and like I'm working through in therapy right now. You know? And it's a big affecting thing that people just put their shoulders down and got through. And it wasn't until COVID where you really took inventory of what you've put up with in the name of making a career in something that you really used to love. And some people didn't even realize that over time that love had been drained, and it just became muscle memory and putting themselves at risk after 10 years.
I actually want to do a little zig here against this because you see it happen, I think, across a lot of industries. And actually, pretty recently, something happened. Of course, I'll bring it back there because it's me. But a pretty interesting thing happened in the beer industry, in the craft beer industry, where a brewer and someone who worked at the tap room, her name's Brienne, is well liked, well followed on Instagram, basically started sort of this brewery Me Too movement where she started reposting stories of women working in the craft brewing industry, and it fucking was crazy.
Bad. Yeah.
It basically implicated maybe half of the breweries that exist in the United States. I mean, like over 2,000 breweries of having some sort of illicit,
which is
behavior.
So not surprising.
No,
sadly.
it's not surprising because it's a bro culture thing.
Yes.
But and again, it's a completely different sort of thing. But it's a cultural thing, and you realize, hey, there's something wrong with the culture of this. Like, this isn't right, and that you need more people who can speak up and kind of bring light to the fact that, okay, well, here are the things that we need in place in this industry in order to protect ourselves, both from toxic working conditions and also just overwork and making sure that it's, there are certain safety precautions, and it should be like that across all industries. And it's sad that it's been taking, it always takes like multiple whistleblowers and people coming out of the woodwork in order to share their stories. And in this case with, IATSE, it's like, it's taking the literal manpower of the below the line industry, a man and woman power. I mean that. I didn't mean to mix my message there, but it's going to take such a huge effort for them to get the change that they're looking for. And
the one thing that's different though, the difference is the absolute unprecedented monster turnout. We talk about polling numbers in one of the biggest presidential races of our lifetime in 2020, in 2016. That has been really under the microscope, right? And even when people on both sides feel like everything is on the line, sometimes you're just shocked at the low turnout, even when their own lives and livelihood and personal interests are on the line, right? Time after time, we've seen that. But with this, it was kind of unprecedented. It was something like 90% of all eligible voting members voted, and 98% of that percentage voted to strike. So that is an extraordinary amount of unity. And the thing is, you're talking about gaffers and all these below the line folks,
set dressers,
transpo, PAs. PAs, of course, don't have a union, but these are people from very diverse backgrounds in Los Angeles. It truly is, and to have that unity, it means something. And one of my friends forwarded me this number in their local IATSE. The eligible voters were 2,358 and 2,241 return ballots. 95% voted yes. 2,229, which is 99.5%
crazy
of the vote. With that kind of solidarity, Ben, I think that you will see that. And I had a friend working. I have a friend working on a show, and they were having a meeting, the normal Monday morning meeting, and he said, "Hey, so what's our plan if we go on strike?" And the producers, at the top of the line, the top of the pyramid, at the desk, he told me they're all like, "Oh, that's not gonna. They'll set it before them. That's not gonna happen." With this this cavalier, it's like a caricature. It's like an SNL caricature of how these guys would handle this. Oh, it's nothing. Still not paying attention to everybody and their needs and the seriousness of it. But if I could, I'll tell you a quick story about my own experience. And, I had a Game of Thrones album go viral overnight while I was working on a pilot for a show. And what I should have done in retrospect is take that day off, no matter what, no matter how underhanded they were. Not underhanded.
Understaffed.
understaffed they were, or how big the deadline was. This was maybe a once in a lifetime thing. I was getting calls from Huffington Post and Nerdist and shit. And I went to work the next day instead of fielding calls and continuing to make media, which I really could have milked. And who knows what my career could have been. But I felt this loyalty to this show. They ultimately ended up firing me without giving me a reason for it. That's years down the line. So, of course, hindsight is 20/20. But in a different experience, I'm with a team, and I've worked for some people who have been horrible to me and have been the Devil Wears Prada stereotypes. You know, I've had that stereotypical experience in Hollywood, but this situation was different because I was working with, to this day, people I really respected and liked on a personal level and would hang out with afterwards and have a beer. You know, this is not the assholes. This is not the worst job I've ever had. It's one of the better jobs I ever had. Okay. We're still working 15-hour days, but I have genuinely liked these people. And it was Halloween. The anniversary is coming up. And now, of course, my favorite holiday is always a little tainted because I have this memory. But I show up to work in a Space Jam jersey and shorts. Everyone knows it's my favorite holiday. I told everyone all day that I was seeing Danny Elfman that night to see Nightmare Before Christmas live. They knew what a big fan I was. And I was freaking out. And the whole day they were saying, we're going to get you out of here early. Don't worry. You know, you only have to work 12 hours today. We're going to make sure you get to this concert on time. I'm like, great. Getting close to the end of the day, it would not be unusual on Fridays, as it was this year, for me to pick up a drive from them and drop it off at a post house for the VFX team to work on. And what I would do is then I would pick up the drive and bring it back on Monday. In this particular day, I put the drive in my trunk, and honestly, it wasn't unusual if I had a busy day sometimes to then drop it off Saturday morning, first thing. And it was always enough time. There's always enough turnaround for that material to be worked on. But think about it. This is literally like 8 p.m. on Halloween on a Friday. And I was thinking, oh, I'll just drop it off tomorrow, like I sometimes do. Turn off my phone, go to the concert. I'm in Danny Elfman bliss. I turn on my phone after having one beer, turn on my phone. I had 23 missed text messages, 3 voicemails, like 10 missed calls. And I immediately started getting hot, very hot and sweating and then dizzy. And I thought, oh, fuck, I have to call them back. And then all of a sudden it clicked for me. They're calling about this drive. You know, did you drop on the drive? They're saying they don't have it. You know, what happened to it? Where are you? And it's not like they didn't know where I was. And these are people that I really liked, you know, who weren't assholes to me ever. But I freaked out. I lost consciousness. I fell to the floor. Pretty quickly woke up again. I looked down. I've got blood on my Bill Murray Space Jam jersey. I'm completely out of it, dizzy as fuck. I'm running up the stairs of the Staples Center, and I collapsed again. This time, hitting the wall straight on, and I was out for like a minute and a half. They called EMTs. I was rushed to emergency room at around midnight in LA. And luckily, my health insurance had just kicked in like the week and a half before. Otherwise, this whole endeavor would have been like $7,500. I get to the hospital. My friends Kelly, Mike, and Sloan are all in costume. Kelly is a showgirl. Mike has a astronaut helmet on. They're all sitting in the waiting room like the Beetlejuice, the scene in Beetlejuice, right? They finally released me. I wore a heart monitor for 2 months because they didn't know if it was a panic attack or if I was in serious danger. They didn't know what happened. When I'm describing what's happening to them, they didn't have an answer, and they were very, very concerned. At the end of 2 months, it ended up being okay, but I went into work wearing this heart monitor. Everyone knew what happened, you know, and it became this, we won't talk about it ever. We won't bring it up. And of course, there was zero consequences. You know, I got home from the hospital at about 3:30 in the morning, and then I was at the post house the moment it opened at 7 a.m. to drop off that drive. You know, 3 hours of sleep. And that's the mentality. That's what we're fighting against. We're fighting against, it might be too late for us, but we are fighting for this not to become this ingrained norm. You know, I felt that it was more important for this drive and this show than my own personal success, my own personal health. And I realize now that was ingrained in me.
This is not, there are many terrible stories like this
that are way worse, way worse.
And it really does, it really is a cross of, there's a special system and there's a special reason why it's so terrible in this industry, and it's exactly what Ben was saying, and it has to do with these, like, it's exactly those moments. We have this location, we have it for this amount of time, and you have to do this, and you get the turnaround. I think that's the one thing that sets it slightly apart, other than the medical industry, which does deal with a lot of the very same thing. But what's really interesting right now,
guess where my first job was.
And
residents and stuff, it's insane what they're put through.
And I think what's going to be really interesting to see what happens with a lot of this stuff is you have part of it, which is this idea of striking and bringing awareness. And I think the key to any industry that this kind of thing is happening in is also things have to trickle down. You have to have voices at the top that are fighting for you. And then it's all of those fucking pieces in the middle of it, because there are these buffers there are 5% buffer on this crew side, right? That's getting closer towards management. And then you have the 5% on the bottom side of management. And those are the people you're friends with, Nick. Like, not specifically, I'm not saying that, but what you were saying before, where you're like, I'm working with these nice people and stuff, and they are just as much cogs. They're just cogs with slightly more power, and they're gatekeepers. And I think that's going to be a huge part of turning this around, is figuring out how to get that gatekeeping working. But the other side of it that's going to be really interesting, and this is something anecdotally that I was talking to someone in the legal profession, is there are people dropping out of these professions a lot. And there are other people making all kinds of money taking those jobs up, basically almost kind of like a scab idea, saying, yeah, you know what, if you want, I'll work these ridiculous hours and you just pay me, this ridiculous price for it. And companies are going to do that for as long as they can. But at some point that's going to start drying up. And I think that's the biggest thing we're seeing post-COVID, is there are people going, you know what, I see this money I could be making doing what I was doing, but I just don't like it, and I don't want to do it anymore, and I'd like to see my family, and I'd like to have a life outside of that. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing that happens, is that there are people just going to say, you know what, until this is fixed, no, I'm not. It's not even a strike. It's I don't work for you anymore, and maybe I'll come back to this, maybe not, but I don't want your life. And I think that's going to be a huge, powerful part of this, is people, and it's so hard. And Ben, you brought up, and it's a great example. This is absolutely Me Too and Time's Up and all of these movements we've seen in the last 5 years happening, is enough people make noise about it and make it a thing that you can't get away with anymore, and you make these people nervous that they can't get away with it anymore, so they're forced to do the right thing.
You can't keep getting away with it.
Yeah, like I think it's
Jesse Pinkman.
It's going to be super fucking interesting that there is a slow turn, and I think that there's a really important piece to this that is always the part of it that bothers me the most, and I've 100% been guilty of it, and I try not to be anymore, especially when you see it and you're confronted with it. But there is this idea that, oh, I went through this bad shit, so
Matt,
just do it.
You just described my experience with there's two types of producers in my experience, right? The ones that were sort of had it hit right away, struck gold, and jumped to the top of the line without having to pay their dues. They're slightly different. They're usually aloof. They're usually bad to work for, but they're at least usually aloof. The ones that had to do these grueling 16-hour days and take shit from their boss every single fucking day and get coffee every day at 3 p.m. and get reprimanded if you forgot the raw sugar that day. Those people have that mindset, and they've been keeping this culture alive almost as if it's like you said, if I had to go through it, then why shouldn't everybody else? You know, I had to put up with all that shit. It's like student loan forgiveness. You know, if they passed that and gave everyone free education, I'd be like, right on. But then a part of me would be like, fuck. Fuck.
How long did I pay for that?
But you know what? That wouldn't last very long because I have an ounce of fucking empathy. And people, you're right. People have to reclaim that empathy again. And you have to end that culture to cut off its head. And I think that's the bigger, loftier goal. When you hear a strike, traditionally, you're, I think, again, conditioned to think it's always about money, you know? And yeah, while it's part of this, it really is about, we have to end this culture before it gets away from us. It's already gotten away from us. You see, you talk about Me Too. I mean, Weinstein and Me Too was part of the industry too. It was like a different, you talk about heads, you know, it's like a different Hydra head of the pitfalls of the industry. You know, you got predators, sexual predators. You have just plain predators who are taking advantage of people's livelihood and
then people enabling those
yeah.
predators knowingly.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's going to be, you know, and that's the thing that you sort of what seems to need to be happening. What has been happening recently is this idea of like, if enough big people fall, then awareness is like, so Me Too took Weinstein and Kevin Spacey and all of these big names had to go away. I won't say get screwed because they didn't. They live on wherever, like Perv Island, and you know, have a gazillion dollars, whatever. But it was enough of a shakeup that the rest of
Epstein's Island.
Yeah, the rest of the people are like, fuck, I got to clean up. Like, I guess we can't like go like grab women's asses unless we're Urban Meyer. But like, you can't just go and that's a terrible.
Oh, he did more
analysis.
than that.
She did not seem like she was not consenting. So I can't compare it. It's just a funny.
It's not about consent. It's about there was literally a picture of Urban Meyer and his wife on the wall a few feet in front of him at his own restaurant as he fingered a co-ed.
Well, that's how that girl knew he'd be a good provider. I think it's okay. It's really interesting.
Urban Meyer, good Lord.
And that's where. So the question to you guys, and I'm kind of curious. Like,
what a dummy! What a fucking stupid asshole!
So Ben, do you think?
Jesus Christ!
I don't know how we got on Urban Meyer.
I was a terrible joke, and I don't mean. I'll forget.
Okay, no. It's actually pretty. It's actually hold on.
Nick,
It's actually pretty apt. It's a guy who has no business being at the level that he's at, and yet can get away with a lot and dictate a lot of. Oh my God! Listen, I'm sorry.
Because I have
Equal Opportunity Podcast.
I'm trying to get Ben some time to talk as
fine.
well. So,
had an insert.
My question,
just like Urban Meyer.
My question to you, Ben, is: do you think it is more beneficial for this cause for the strike to happen, or for them to reach a loose agreement in the next week or two?
I mean, well, that's a loaded question if there ever was one, because this is the okay. Here's what happens.
It's like when Sam Richardson makes him be the only judge of the Buffalo Boys competition.
It's like, well, then you could settle, and nobody really gets taught a lesson, and so it's still pervasive in the industry, but it's kind of better, but maybe not. And then it's, leading to other issues down the road. And then you've got the other end where it's just like, yes, we go on strike, but guess what happens when you go on strike? You don't get to work, and then you don't get to work for a really long time, and then there's a standstill, and then a lot of people are in bad situations. I mean, there's no right answer. I mean, ultimately, I think that you do have to like just kind of at one point rip the Band-Aid off. If I had to lean one way or the other, I would say it's probably better if they actually go on strike. You can only go on strike for a certain amount of time before people start bleeding. And when you start,
and think about COVID. Like, they lost so much money shutting down for COVID.
Yeah.
But guess what? They lost so much money that they figured out a very precise, intricate infrastructure and had very, very little breakout. And it was only when money was affected. And I think that you're right, Ben. What is it going to take? Who knows? But we do know that whether it goes through with the strike or they settle, a change from that has got to be a complete infrastructure change. There's got to be software that monitors hours.
Yeah.
Let's up the pay. Let's lower the hours.
You're bringing some safe city shit in there.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
It's sort of strange even to think about it, the fact that it is a union and it does not have a time card system necessarily, which most unions, that's like their number one thing is like, oh yeah, we clock, here's the exact amount of hours. You must clock out during this amount of time.
This industry is so sexy and everyone wants to work in it that you get away with murder where there is that infrastructure in other even similar industries. You look and you go, oh, they don't have that. Oh, they don't have that protection. Oh, that wasn't in place. And it really makes you think, it really does.
Yeah. It's it's interesting. Oh, like for example, this is one of the funny things when I used to work in healthcare, when I briefly worked in healthcare, patient access, and insurance. It was, one of the things they always drive into management is they're just like, you have to watch and make sure that, people don't get too much overtime, because you pay time and a half for overtime. So the more and more overtime that, shows up on every period, every pay period, every 2-week pay period that you turn in, you want to see as little overtime as possible, because if you pass a certain threshold, that means the higher ups up in Jacksonville, they're going to start asking questions about like what the operational protocols and stuff like that are there. I was like, well, you don't know what my staffing issue is. Like this random person in Jacksonville's not going to know what the fuck my staffing issue is. They're not going to understand the fact that we had to go through a fucking tropical storm, which means everyone has to be there on site at the same time.
God.
In the meantime, I'm trying to manage this where I'm on salary and I'm working 60 hours a week. And some of the people who are working minimum fucking wage make more money than me because they do get time and a half. And I'm like, holy shit. I mean, it was such a fucked up industry.
Imagine if you had the girls back then.
It would have been impossible.
Working those hours with the girls, and those hours are standard for people with families in this industry. And it's sort of like, it's almost like, army dads. I mean, it's kids grow up without their parents in this industry.
It's not like I don't work that much less now. I just get paid a lot more.
You're able to make time for your girls. There are medical emergencies that would be different over the weekend.
Totally,
you know what I mean?
Totally,
and there are a lot of things that contribute to this culture, and it's why it is so difficult to combat. I mean, part of it, I grew up with a dad who worked, like crazy hours, and part of it was because that's what he liked to do. And there are people out there that are legitimate workaholics that enjoy it, and then there are some that hate their families. I'm sorry to say it, but there are people that do not want to be home, and being at work is better than being at home.
That's 0.5% of the eligible voters in NIOC.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's those people. They were just like, shit. You mean I have to go home?
Oh God. Yeah.
Take my wife. No, really, take her.
Like, yeah, and I think, because
I guess the Murphy bed's coming out of the office.
Yeah.
and the other problem is this problem disproportionately affects. Feature films are easier, but short films have really been suffering. I was talking to Gene the other day, and
Gene Shorts,
yes, beside himself about this strike. On those small indie films, you don't have much. If they go on strike, he's got nothing.
Well, on that note,
we did it. You did it.
I think we put that one to bed.
You saved the podcast. You saved it.
Well,
I, for one, love Gene's shorts.
I'm sure. I'm sure even people that are not into the film business intricacies will probably hear some things that they recognize from their own industries. So think.
Yeah.
My urge to our 4 or 5 listeners out there:
be an advocate.
Oh my God.
If you're in an industry like this and you are in a position where you are able to make some kind of, even if it's a small change or how you treat your team members, please think about these things, because no matter how many people say, yeah, I'm game to do whatever I can, I'll be here as early as one. There's something else driving that.
It's sort of like we're not saying you never use Amazon. Just don't go to bat for Bezos over the factory work.
Hey, you leave Amazon out of this. That's my bread and butter, and they bring me lovely things. And
no, I'm saying it's fine. I'm saying it's fine, but it's like these faceless, multi-billion-dollar production companies can afford to make things better for their workers. They just can.
Absolutely.
They just can.
They can.
Well, thank you so much for listening to the New Way podcast.
Wait, hold on. One more thing. Sorry.
Oh boy.
Ben, can we make a Gene Shorts character in NBA 2K5?
I think we should.
I think we should, and only he will have the short 70s like Lakers.
Do you know what
everyone else will have?
Do you know what I picture every time you say Gene Shorts? John Lovitz from The Critic. That's what I see in my head every time you say that name. All I see is John Lovitz from The Critic.
It's me, Gene Shorts.
Yeah, that's all I can't get it out of my head. It's just him. It's
I think it worked.
Nope.
There
we go. I knew I had. We got to get one sound in for the show.
Crackhead, do you think that everyone should go on strike in a? Yeah, I agree.
For some reason, when you ever say Gene Shorts, I think of Gene Siskel, which is kind of weird.
We both thought of film critics. Mine's a
That's
fake
very
animated
weird.
one, and
The
yours
synergy
is a
there.
real one.
The synergy is very strange there. Maybe you put a. Well, I did pave the way for that one.
Well, when I
birthplace of all that oily stuff.
When I
You go.
masturbate,
Now that we've given this week's reviews, I was hoping you'd watch my short film.
when I masturbate to Gene Shorts, it is Gene Siskel though. So I understand
What if we use CG to replicate Gene Siskel, voiced by John Lovitz?
John Lovitz. There you go.
And that would be Gene Shorts. It would be a character based on
CG
Siskel. C Gene Siskel.
Computer gene imagery. Yeah. All right. Well, we did it.
Computer gene rated.
We killed that joke.
Well, thank you so much for listening, and we understand we're a little behind on our musical episode, but that's just because we're making it extra special, better for you. And are you in for?
It's my fault.
Something.
It's not.
I needed more time.
I'm not going to put the blame
You're
entirely
not.
on you.
You're not. You're in for.
I needed more time.
You're in for it.
I can't phone this in. I live for these musical episodes.
There's Nick. Nick will be doing his musical in 4 parts. It will air all through the month of November.
Can I tell you though? I had a brilliant idea that I ended up punting, but I thought it was so funny when it came to me, and I did. I was going for a run when it came to me, and I was literally like laughing like a fucking hyena, like as I was running, because I was thinking of ideas about it. Which I was very close to doing Wild Things the musical, which I thought would have been pretty fucking amazing. So
I can't wait for the champagne song.
I mean, there's got to be a Bacon's Bacon.
There's got to be a bacon. You know what? I'm gonna forget I ever heard this. I'm gonna wipe it from my memory.
Show me that.
Go
bacon.
right ahead and make that. Just go ahead and make that musical. I forget we ever had this. I hope you guys are fans of Jeff Smith's Bone comic, obscure Bone comic.
See, the long play I've been doing is I've been saying I'm doing Hellraiser 2 for like 2 months now, and then I'm actually going to do Hellraiser 2. I just show up with Hellraiser 2.
Oh my God. I was hoping for Hellraiser 3, but it'll still be good. But thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you next time. Let's do it together. Cheers.
See you later. Cheers.
See you later.